Okay.
Hey, hello, and welcome everyone to Mulberry Talent Partners Career Conversation. I'll just give everybody a few moments to log on. It looks like we're all successfully logging on. So again, welcome to Mulberry Talent Partners Career Conversation. My name is Kelsey Triff, and I am Mulberry's Talent Acquisition Specialist. A little bit more about Mulberry. We are a full-service staffing and recruiting agency headquartered in Portland, Oregon, with an office in the Silicon Valley. We specialize in human resources, professional and financial office, payroll, and operations positions with direct hire, temp to hire, and temporary opportunities. I would encourage you to check out our website at mulberrytalent.com to see our previously recorded conversations, our upcoming conversations, and check out our new job opportunities, which we update on a very regular basis. So jumping into introductions, we are joined today by Lauren Francis and Dr. Lisa Orbé-Austin. Lauren is our fabulous president and founder, and she founded Mulberry back in June of 2017 and comes with over 25 years of talent acquisition experience. And then Dr. Lisa Orbé-Austin is our licensed psychologist and executive coach, TEDx speaker, and author of Own Your Greatness, Overcome Imposter Syndrome, Beat Self-Doubt, and Succeed in Life. So today we will cover the key signs of imposter syndrome, the skills required to overcome it, and how imposter syndrome may be impacting your job search. And we want today to be extremely interactive, so do not shy away from using the Q&A function in Zoom, and we will get to any and all questions at the end of our webinar. And then we have an exciting giveaway. We'll be giving away 3 copies of Lisa's book. So we'll share the lucky winners in our email that goes out tomorrow. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to Lauren and Lisa.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Lisa, it was so great to meet you early this year. I loved our conversation, and all of the Mulberries and our viewers have been looking forward to having you on. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, for
I'm
sure.
happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much. So let's just jump right in. What is imposter syndrome exactly?
Sure. So imposter syndrome is the experience when you are highly skilled, have accomplishments, credentials, experience, and you have not internalized those experiences, that you feel constantly afraid that you might be found out as a fraud or incompetent. As a result of that fear, you find yourself often either overworking or self-sabotaging to cover up the perceived fraudulence because of the performance anxiety that comes as a result of the triggers that happen around your imposter syndrome. So it generally is experienced as this constant fear of being exposed as a fraud.
Mm-hmm. Right. I've heard that and I've experienced it myself. So
Many of us have, yeah.
Yeah, many of us have. And how does it affect, one of the things we do at Mulberry is we are a staffing agency, and we do a lot of coaching, a lot of career coaching. We meet people at so many different stages of their career journey, and we see this regularly. How does it affect people in their job search?
So the research shows that when you have high levels of imposter syndrome, there are a couple different ways that it impacts your search. So it impacts your knowledge of the job market. So people with imposter syndrome tend to have less understanding of what's out there in the job market for them and what they're qualified for. They also tend to underestimate their value add to an organization because they have trouble internalizing their accomplishments. So it's hard for them to assess where they actually might fall in a particular team. It's also hard for them to assess what role might be appropriate because oftentimes they're underestimating their skills and overestimating others. And it's also problematic even once they land because it can affect your ability to negotiate your salary, because oftentimes people with imposter syndrome are just happy to have the job and don't necessarily want to lose it and are very fearful of losing it. So are often caught by these not negative thoughts that if they actually negotiate, they'll lose the offer. And so they're very kind of concerned about, just everything remaining stable, so they won't take the risks. So there's a lot of different ways that it impacts your job search.
Right. And do you find people tend to not apply to jobs that they're not 100% qualified for?
Yeah, well, the research, and I always go to the research because I really like to rely on data to come up with what, kind of like what's happening. But The research finds that actually women have difficulty applying for positions in which they are not 100% qualified for, where men will apply for positions where they're 60% or more qualified for, but women will tend to not want to apply for anything else unless they feel like they have all the qualifications, which is, not necessarily useful to them, because oftentimes when they have 100% of the qualifications, then they're overqualified for a job like that, frankly, because no one's expecting that they have everything. They're expecting that they have the majority, more than 60%, but not everything. And so oftentimes you're underestimating your skills by applying for things that you're 100% qualified for.
Right. And they don't really value their transferable skills, or to be able to craft a narrative,
Yeah.
or to make a case for how they can bring those transferable skills. And so it's sort of like what I don't have as opposed to what I do have.
Yep.
Do you find, you mentioned men and women, and I've heard you in another talk about how men, the difference between men and women in the workplace, where women take more risk and men tend not to. Can you, can you say a
Sure.
little bit?
Yeah. And so what we find in the scholarship around imposter syndrome is that oftentimes you hear a lot of people say, oh, it's a women's experience. No, the data doesn't show that it's solely for women. The data is inconclusive. It shows that sometimes men have it more, sometimes women have it more, that it hasn't yet concluded who has it more. And so
Mhm,
I think it's really important that we don't get caught in thinking this is just a women's issue.
mhm,
What it does find is that women and men sometimes experience this differently. And
mhm,
so for women, the experience is from the data that they will be counterphobic. So if they're afraid of something, they'll actually walk toward the thing that they're afraid of and live inside of the constant imposter syndrome. And so that they tend to kind of not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily tend to affect their ability to achieve. It may affect other pieces like promotion and advancement and salary, but in terms of like being able to actually get the thing done, it doesn't necessarily affect that. For men, it does. And the kind of theory is that men, because of the way we acculturate them to masculinity, that they feel like they need to cover and be able to show that they're competent and capable. So they tend to kind of they tend to put themselves into positions in which they know that they will have mastery over a situation. And as a result, they're with peers that are less competent than them oftentimes. And so they're not taking the risks. They tend to avoid the things that trigger their imposter syndrome. So they find that to be the case. Clearly, it's not every man that experiences it that way, but generally they find that this is the experience difference for men and women.
They play it more safe, and women
Yeah.
sort of jump into the turmoil or
Yeah,
the
and
chaos.
will constantly wrestle with the imposter syndrome. It's not like the imposter syndrome goes away once they do the risky thing. It's like then it's constantly there. Where men, I think, want to suppress the experience of imposter syndrome, so they will do the thing that feels most safe.
And so do you find the link to childhood trauma or childhood, you know, um, I don't know, experiences? Can you speak to that? Like, have you noticed a link there that would be helpful for people to know about?
Yeah, in the research, it's pretty evident that there is a pretty connected. So people you've seen, I don't know if people have seen it. There was a recent article on HBR about oppression causes imposter syndrome, and the article was awful. It was not a really great article because that's no data points to that, because there are privileged groups that experience imposter syndrome.
Mm,
What we have seen in the research is that that there are some common early experiences that lay the foundation for imposter syndrome. And
mm,
some of those experiences are being caught in particular roles in your family. So, for example, one of them is that you either were the intelligent one, so you're the one in your family who was seen as naturally gifted, naturally skilled. So everything had to come easy. And when things didn't come easy for you, then you felt like, oh, that's proof that I'm not as smart as everyone thinks I am.
mm,
The hardworking one, so the one who wasn't naturally gifted and everything had to come from grinding and working really, really hard. And so as a result, you never saw that you had natural gifts and talents and skills that were far beyond. Not everything required that, but the perception has always been that you'd had to grind. So those are the two most common ones found in the literature. The third one, when Richard and I were writing the book, we said the ones in the literature, these two ideas we've seen, but we also have seen a third type that is not covered in the literature. And we call it the survivor. And that's the person in the family in which their accomplishments, the things that they had obtained were about survival. It was about getting out, were getting away from something. It was, they didn't have parental figures who were necessarily telling them they were the smart or the hardworking one. That was either absent or abusive, and that their experience of survival was about the accomplishments were getting them out. And so these are experiences that when you are like, you can be in a C-suite position for many, many, roles, and yet still feel if one thing goes wrong, I could lose everything.
Right.
And so that third type also is not discussed in the literature, but we've seen it in our practice over and over again. And so, and there are other issues that kind of are connected. So issues of codependence, narcissistic parental figures, issues with anger and conflict management in the family. So there's a lot of different family dynamics that are underneath imposter syndrome. It's not a thing that social media creates or other things create later in life. It's an early on created experience.
Yeah, it is. And for me personally, I grew up in Palo Alto, Stanford University, going to school with professors' kids, and my parents are highly educated, and I didn't go to college. And so for many years, I was just that. I mean, I was not legit. There is no way. And I would never share it. I'd be like, please don't ask me where I went to college. I'd hide it. And I see people do that too. When I have people that don't have a degree, but they have this incredible resume of accomplishments, and they can't pull it together. And so it took me a long time. I just tried to avoid it. And now, to be able to speak to you and to others and to share it openly just feels so much, you feel freer, and you just say, it is what it is. And you have to own it. You
can appreciate what you do have, right? I think, I've actually worked with a lot of clients from Palo Alto, and even when they've gone to college and have advanced degrees, if they didn't come from Harvard or Columbia, or, they feel like they are less than because of the culture of Palo Alto. And I think it's a great reminder that it can be that that you just aren't even, that you have credentials, you have experiences, but you don't value them as much as you value other people's credential. Like you get into these ideas that something makes you smart and something makes you not smart or not capable. But these are false ideas and false notions.
And I think we carry this stuff in our heads, and you have to verbalize this.
Yeah.
It helps so much to have a coach or have people that can help support you through it.
Yep.
Yeah. So that covers some of the causes. What are one of the things I've seen is the whole idea of self-sabotage, where, tell us about the connection to self-sabotage and imposter syndrome. I had a dream last night that I was late. It was 2 minutes to the time we were launching. I wasn't near my computer. I was caught in one of those running dreams where I never get anywhere. And I was like, oh my God, here I go again. I'm late. I'm not prepared. I'm self-sabotaging, right? And so I woke up with this dream, and I was like, oh, this is perfect. We got to talk about this with Lisa. So
it's an anxiety dream.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you're pointing to the fact that, what underlies self-sabotage is typically in the imposter syndrome is performance anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And so this experience that you get triggered for the imposter syndrome, you feel like, oh my God, I'm never going to do this right. Or I'm never going to be able to accomplish X or Y or Z. And then as a result of that performance anxiety, there are typically two routes with imposter syndrome. Either you overwork and overperform in order to make sure that you do everything perfectly, or you kind of like procrastinate because the anxiety is so overwhelming that you wait till the last minute. And what we see with imposter syndrome is not like a complete self-sabotage that is like failure self-sabotage.
Mm-hmm.
It is what we consider short bursts of overwork. So you might wait, so something maybe due Friday, you might wait till like Thursday night, then you spend like almost 20 hours working on it. Mm-hmm. So it's like, it's not like a self-sabotage where you're just like, oh, well, I guess I won't turn it in. Mm-hmm. We're more like, we're going to get it done, but it's going to hurt to get it done with the self-sabotage in the way that, and it also leaves us open to not being able to, do things like quality assurance and check things and make sure that, things are done. And so if anything goes wrong, then we kind of like blow that thing up that went wrong and say, if I had only blah, blah, and you get into this thing. What underlies it all is typically perfectionism. And so this idea that things have to be perfect in order to be acceptable. And so we can get very caught up in this perfectionistic notion, which makes it really difficult to accomplish anything without feeling overwrought about it.
Mm-hmm. Self-sabotage and not self-sabotage, but low self-esteem. I learned that low self-esteem is linked to procrastination. The same idea that that's kind of covering the self-sabotage as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like this idea of like self-efficacy, like that you don't feel like you're going to be that efficacious, you're not going to do it right. So as a result, you're not going to do it at all. Perfectionism is also linked to procrastination. A lot of things are linked to anxiety is linked to procrastination. There's a lot of different components of it. But typically it's fear-based, and this idea that I'm not going to do it as well as people expect me to, or as well as I want to do. So I'm just going to avoid doing it until the very last minute. And then the idea is you'll condense the anxiety into that period, but you're still feeling anxious as you're procrastinating. And then it's just one intense burst of overwork, or multiple intense bursts of overwork.
Now, one of the questions I had was, I've noticed that the idea of imposter syndrome has become, I don't want to, is it popularized? It's just more, you see it more. Is there a connection at all to COVID, or is there, how do you kind of see this?
Yeah. What do I attribute the popularity to?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that, for people who don't know, the concept is over 40 years old. It was developed by two psychologists who were working in a counseling center in Georgia, and started to we're working with grad students and faculty members and administrators, and being like, these incredibly accomplished people, why are they all so freaked out that they're going to be found out? Like, that's never going to happen. What is happening here? It's not discussed in the literature. It's not discussed what's going on here. And they started to kind of like write about it and do research on it. And to clarify, imposter syndrome is not a mental health diagnosis. You can't find it in the DSM. You can't find it in ICD-10. It is considered fairly adaptive because you are typically fairly successful on the outside, and people don't oftentimes realize that you're struggling with this internally. I think, to be honest, like, I think it was before COVID, it got popularized. We got our book deal before COVID. And I think, one of the main people that began to kind of break it open was Michelle Obama, when she started talking about that she's had imposter syndrome. And I think she is beloved. And I think that, I think her admitting, people admire her. I think she's so brilliant and so amazing and capable. When she began to talk about it, I think it began to really, crack a new level. I think people have been talking about it for a long time, but I think it cracked a new level. And all these celebrities started talking about their imposter syndrome. And I think it started to really create a dialogue about it that was much more like open and free, and happening at all these different really visible levels that it hadn't really happened at before.
Right. Sort of when Prince Harry started talking about mental health, that we all of a sudden we could talk about it.
Yeah. I think that she really did she did a video where she's quoted saying it. So there were some really big moments, I think, that really helped people to kind of be like, what is this thing? And how do I understand if I have it? And
so what, people that are listening, how do people seek support for this? And can you really, can you recover from it? Meaning, I've had it most of my life, and I still see it show up in my life.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that question around sort of, is it overcomable? Can you be done with it forever? My feeling is, it's an unpopular feeling, but it's true. I don't think you can ever get rid of it so that you're never triggered ever again. I think the point is that you can turn the dial down on it, and so it's not as loud in your life. It doesn't actually force you to make certain decisions. That in essence, it does get triggered and you are reminded of it, but you actually choose a different behavior once you have the skills to do so. You don't necessarily avoid, you don't procrastinate, you don't kind of get caught in these situations where you're not negotiating, you really learn to kind of dial down the volume so it doesn't change the behavior in your life. I think in